Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Jeremy, and today in part 4 of the Using the Comparative Historical Analysis Tool, we'll be looking at content from grade 10, Unit 1, Early Modern Empires, with the video objectives of identifying categories for comparison using step 3 of the Comparative Historical Analysis Tool, and then comparing to historical case studies using step 4 of the Comparative Historical Analysis Tool. In the previous videos, we read and annotated two sources on the Bourbon Dynasty and the Tokugawa Shogunate from grade 10, Unit 1, Lesson 11, and we completed steps 1 and 2 of the Comparative Historical Analysis Tool. Today, we're going to look at step 3, which is identifying categories for comparison, and step 4, actually using a comparison chart to compare two case studies. So the first part of step 1, we gathered evidence and we tried to figure out, well, what do we know about our two case studies, the Bourbon Dynasty and the Tokugawa Shogunate? We had engaged in step 0, where we had read two documents to give us some ideas, but we also brought in some outside information to really put more things here as well. And then we did step 2, where we were listing categories and we had grouped some of our evidence together for some major themes and points that we had noticed. So now that we have done all of that, our next step is to really try to make sense of the information and start the comparative process. So in step 3, we're going to choose one category of comparison, and you can use any category that you wish here as well. So if you had a different category than you could definitely use it. You could pause this video right here to look at step 3 and use your category, and then to plot out in step 4 the similarities and differences within that category between the Tokugawa Shogunate and the Bourbon Dynasty. Also for step 4, while we will look at the similarities and differences in a comparison chart, if you are a visual learner, alternatively, you could actually do this in another way as well. So you may wish to look at this in a Venn diagram if you wish to. And it works in a similar way. You would pick your category and label your category, and then make sure you put the differences you see within that category on one side, the similarities, and then the differences. So you could do this in whichever way works best for you. I am actually going to go to the chart method and I'll walk you through what I did. When I was looking through my categories, I saw centralization of power for both of them. And I thought that was a great comparison category. So when you're trying to choose your categories for comparison, make sure you have enough information for both of them there. And that's why I liked the centralization of power category for this activity. So when I look at it, and I'm putting some evidence down here, you could have others and you could add more to mine as well. Some differences in how they centralize. The Daimyos had to help build the castle or give labor in the Tokugawa Shogunate. I didn't hear or see that about the Versailles Palace. I also know from previous knowledge that a family member always had to be in Edo. So even though they were not required to always stay there, a family member always had to be there. So while they were guests of the shogun, they kind of were held captive and hostages there to make sure that the daimyos kind of stayed in line. So I definitely put that in. And then I noticed some differences in the Bourbon dynasty. So I'm going to go over to this side real quick. France was an absolute monarchy under Louis XIV, whereas in the Tokugawa shogunate, there was some shared power between the emperor and the shogun, despite the fact that the shogun seemed to have more power. And at least from my readings, I did see that the king fostered a culture of loyalty to the king and fear. And then nobles consisted of about 1% of the population. So you didn't really have the nobles, even though they lived there part of the year, they weren't the major part of Versailles. Some similarities between them: the daimyos and French nobles were forced to live in either Edo or Versailles part of the year so they could be observed and monitored. That was definitely one way to centralize and control and monitor these nobles. And there were rules and laws that governed aspects of domo and noble life. So while they were trapped there, they also had to live in certain ways over there. And finances and administration were tightly controlled by the king and the shogun. So they really had a lot of control about what the nobles could do, but also how money was spent in their respective empires. So we're noticing now that there's a lot of things similar but also different between these two case studies. You can add lots more to here, or you may have different evidence, but this is a good starting point for us. And our next step is to take everything we've done from steps 1 through 4, and we're now going to look at putting together a comparative statement because we're going to talk about, well, how did these two empires centralize their power? I'll see you in the next video.